time to time, whether you are part of a developing country or you are thinking like a social scientist social scientist or social science researcher from a different part of the world. The questions are more or less uniform, and that's the good news about it, that regardless of where you belong and what discipline is basically your core discipline, there's a lot of commonality in social science research. I'll tell you some of these issues as I present a few points that might be of interest to you. That's one. And number two, I would bring to you some of these questions as an economist really looks at, and how one tries to answer some of these questions with the methodological rigor, whether it's a theoretical perspective or using data or using some kind of an advanced technique. Sometimes we use that, and it has been very popular, very famous after Professor Abhijit Banerjee received his Nobel along with Esther and Michael Kramer, that the RCT, the randomized controlled trials, can also be a viable way of testing some of the questions that come to you from a social science perspective. So let me show you some of these issues with the help of a presentation. In between, if you have questions, you can put it down in the text message box, or you can just stop me. You can unmute yourself and just speak to me if you have a question or a clarification that you need to know immediately as I talk about. And I hope I'll be speaking for not more than 40 minutes, beyond which you can have time to raise some questions or issues which might be would break this monologue of going just me telling you some of these things, and also in a way I would be able to learn from you what are the things, what are the questions that you consider important in view of social science research. Let me also add one more thing, which is of relevance here, is that I look up a lot of research materials that produced in South Asia in general, but largely from India, through a journal which is called the South Asian Journal of Macroeconomics and Public Finance. So Professor Sugata Marjit, who's currently with the Indian Institute of Foreign Trade, IIFT, Kolkata, and myself, we jointly edit the journal. And on average, every year, we receive no less than 250 to 300 papers on different aspects of macroeconomics, public finance, which talks about large issues or several issues concerning the health of public finance across different states in India. And we still find that the largest set of those papers are somehow not journal ready. Okay, so just because I'm possibly talking to a large number of young researchers, certainly everybody here is probably younger than me, so I would have a vantage point in trying to tell you that what sells in journals is an important consideration for budding researchers, because unless we keep on working on issues of interest, issues of mutual interest, issues of interest which is not just contained or not just specific to the subject of economics, but for social science in general, for people working in business, in commerce, in having a degree in management or accountancy, whichever it is. Like I said in the beginning, there's a lot of commonality in the questions, and trying to answer them as a concerted effort on the part of social science is a meaningful procedure. So I will be telling you what sells in a journal, the way we would like to see the progress of research that happens in India. The other point is that as part of ICSSR, I also get to review a large number of papers that come for project clearance. I mean, as submitted as projects through Impress. That's a flagship program of ICSSR New Delhi. I'm not directly part of it, but I review a large number of papers that are submitted to Impress as the call goes on from time to time. But again, I see that there's a lot of methodological gaps. There's a lot of questions which are unanswered in the process of submitting the projects that doesn't really make the cut in terms of project funding from national and international agencies. So I would also try to tell you a bit of those issues which could be useful for you in pushing your way of research in future, right? So allow me just 1 minute, and I go to my presentation and go from there and start from there. Okay, can you see the presentation? It's probably coming through.
Yes, sir, we can see it.
Okay, thank you. So it basically says, yeah, I can see it myself, what happened. Well, it basically says the direction of social science research in India and some intriguing questions. That's the title I sent to Dr. Lagardo, and that's my whereabouts. This is where I belong. And to begin, I would say that it's fairly important for all of us, and not just for budding researchers, but for even older people like us, to keep thinking like a researcher, right? So research doesn't happen overnight. It's not something that you patch up from different sources and bring out a paper and try to sell it and push it as hard as you can and make a cut nationally, internationally. It just doesn't happen that way. You need to start by, and I'm pretty sure all of you already know this because you have gone through your PhD programs, you have gone through the basic courses in research methodology and have been exposed to various seminars and conferences and so on. But yet these sometimes seem to be violating our natural. Okay, just give me a second. Yeah. PPT, I can zoom it in, or I can make it full screen. Is it visible now? Is it changing slides? Can you see the change in slides?
No, sir, it is not changing. Slides.
It's not changing. So I'll just make it bigger in that case.
Now it's moving.
Now it's okay, but I can just make it bigger because somebody wrote to me to zoom it in. Is it better now?
Yes.
Is it visible? Yeah, okay. So I was saying that thinking like a researcher is like bringing together the parallel questions along with the major question or the main question that you have in mind, and put that into the research process in the sense that it's a step-by-step journey towards the truth. Right, because all we are trying to do is put your hand like we present in a core drama, right? You put your hand on a Bible or a Gita and say that it's a truth that's the only thing I'm going to speak and nothing else. So research is all about telling the truth and trying to tell people that this is what you find as something new, as something innovative, as something which has not been discussed in the literature before, or that you're trying to advance the available findings in the available literature by either drawing in new evidence or providing a new theory or combining the two and giving it a new look, new perspective. And there has to be something additionally contributed on your part that would make your research stand out compared to what is being produced on a day-to-day basis in a large number of occasions, right? Remember, people these days write a lot, read less. Okay, this is not something that we were growing up as part of our program, that we were reading more and writing less because writing wasn't that easy, and the number of journals which were really acceptable as publishing outlets were fewer compared to what we have now. There has been an explosion of journals in all subjects. It's not just social science. There has been science subjects. There has been open access journals. These are some of the things that we never heard of, right? We couldn't imagine that your paper would be out in a few days' time, available in the internet, readily available for anybody to view and use and cite, right? So these are changes that are really making us enthusiastic about writing more. but there's a catch. Like we say that no lunch comes free. There's always a catch that in the haste of writing too much, we may be missing some of the more interesting points. Maybe we are trying to subdue some of the questions that takes time to develop. We are subduing, we are trying to avoid more rigorous analysis in some cases, because all of these things are very time consuming. Like we say that PhD is more about a commitment for 5 years, right? It's not like you can just get done in a 2-year course and then you get a PhD, not like that. It's a lifetime commitment. And even if, particularly for academics like you and me, it's not an office job which starts at 10 and ends at 5, right? It's something that stays at the back of your mind day in, day out, right? Even when we are doing something completely different from your academic work, your questions, we have done something here, we have done something there, that keeps on bugging you back of your mind. That makes you and me a researcher, right? At some point, Professor Kaushik Basu, many of you must have heard his name, he used to say that I write my best papers during the time when I sleep, because mind doesn't sleep, right? So it keeps on working even when you are away from your extent job or extent work that you are basically facing. So thinking like a researcher and trying to push it day in, day out is something we have to acquire as a taste. And this is one of the differences you see with the rest of the world, that in United States or in UK or some of the more advanced countries where research outputs really go all the way towards policy making, and that's a journey which is not easy, and again it's very complicated. I'll tell you briefly, because we don't really have too much time, but I'll briefly tell you a story by a professor called Richard Blundell. He is in UCL, University College London, and he has been knighted by the Queen of England for his tremendous work on econometrics, his policy making on health and other issues. So he was visiting Kolkata at some point, and I had the opportunity to speak to him, take an interview for a publication in Bengali for a regional outlet. And I was telling him, how do you really, as a researcher, enter the world of the policymakers? Because it's not easy. We try to write about a policy, we try to think about a policy at the end of the research, because it's also part of what we do. We try to inform the government, whether it's a central government, whether it's a local government, whether it's a municipal government, it doesn't matter. If we can give them a viable policy to work with, it's always better in terms of your research achievement, right? You worked on something, theoretically speaking, you showed that and proved that with data, and then you take it one step forward and make a policy out of it, which the government can utilize and make life of everybody else better. That gives you the utility as a researcher, right? And it doesn't have to be, again, specific to subject of economics or commerce. It can come from sociologists, it can come from political scientists, geographers, everywhere. You can have a policy relevance. Now, I was asking him, how do you really make this journey from your hardcore research to policy? And he says that, look, Saibal, it's not an easy job, because the policymakers don't like you as a researcher. And not me, but generally, policymakers don't like researchers if the policymakers are typically bureaucrats in public offices, because they think that their prominence, their supremacy is going to be surrendered to a researcher who probably holds more a better key to the actual problem, right? So it's a love-hate relationship which you keep on exploring time and again, over and over, try to gain your confidence with the bureaucracy, and that's when your ideas, your questions actually become policies. Your issues actually become policies. And this is the way you make entry into the world of policy, and your sole idea is actually to make the life of everybody else better, because that's what research is all about. Whether it's a scientific research, whether it's a social science research, it's the same way. We try to make everybody else's life better. Okay? So this is one way of thinking that, whether you can really take the research process towards a culmination in policy. And therefore, how you use your research concept, whether it's a pure theory, whether it's a research design, whether you can create certain constructs and measure those constructs, and these are common words used in social science. It's a construct would mean it's a hypothesis. It's a structure that goes in and out with different kinds of assumptions. But obviously, too much assumption-driven results are questionable, because then you relax the assumption, your questions start becoming less critical, your answers become less confident in driving a policy regimentation. So how you derive your constructs, how you create your world of research question has to have a balance between all your practical observations and the minimum assumptions you actually might need. And then the next point, which is of paramount importance here, is that you need the scale reliability. And I'm pretty sure, once again, that many of you know these terms, but I'm just trying to bring it back to you, because sometimes we try to get to the core of a subject by doing little in terms of your observable data, or the kind of theory you are making, which is limited in its approach and qualifications. So you try to make the best by bringing in scale reliability, that you expand it to a maximum number of occasions, a larger scale, and you see your research to remain valid under a large number of alternative conditions. Then you know that what you have done. I am sorry, I'm not very conversant in Hindi. My Hindi is poor, I would say. So I would have to continue with English only. If there are questions in the end you want to speak in Hindi, I might be able to answer those. Okay? Right. But I can do is speak a little slowly, so that there's no problem in getting in what I'm trying to say. All right. So scale reliability means that you can actually expand the scope of your research and look at the validity. Okay? It's also important, however, that if you are talking about sampling some of the variables and sampling some of the data, right? You often see that in television news, the reporter actually goes in and barges into somebody on the street and asks them about certain policy directions of the government, or certain reactions to something that has happened, right? You might really internalize the fact that it's not a good way of getting representative answers, right? Because the people you are talking to, people you are speaking to, might not be representative of the society that you are trying to capture in terms of your research question, right? So sampling, for all the empirical work any of you are interested in doing, is absolutely important, right? How you sample, there are a couple of samples which are available from nationally representative sampling sources, like the NSSO, National Sample Survey Office, right, or organization. It's under CSO, Government of India, MOSPI, and you get some data from these sources which are directly available as a secondary source. And you do not question the sampling methodology or the applicability in those cases, because it's expected that the sample covers all the states, all strata of individuals living in the country, and therefore it's expected to be very representative of a country like India, which is very different in different parts, language-wise, custom-wise, our approach-wise, our belief-wise. We are actually quite different in different ways, and it could have actually made several countries of Europe representing India. I mean, it's just like different states representing multiple countries in Europe. It could have been a case like that. But regardless, this is not a social or political question that I'm trying to say. All I'm trying to say, the variability in the responses of the samples is an important issue, which you have to understand while we are trying to talk about a general question, which is going to be valid for multiple states in the country. right? And if you're talking about a theory, it has to cover a larger ground in terms of the variability of people, their customs, their structures, their belief and all that. If you're talking about pure data, then the data must represent different states and different locations and different strata of individuals, income-wise, language-wise, purpose-wise, and so on and so forth. Okay? Then the next point I'm interested in talking about is that if you are trying to create a theoretical basis, right, does it exist or not depends on a lot of issues. So right now on the screen you see something called a theory followed by logical consistency, right? So if we are talking about theoretical constructs, propositions, or boundary conditions, once again, I believe you know these issues and terminologies quite clearly, but otherwise it would mean that are we talking about a large space to work within, right? If the space is not big enough to work within, then your theory might apply to a very small number of cases, right? That's not a good thing. You have to allow yourself a bigger space. For example, suppose somebody is going to present a paper in front of an economist or a mathematician. One question is very common. You might face this question about what is the domain of the variable that you have chosen. Domain, right? How big is the spread? Are we talking about a very narrow space? Are we talking about a very large space? And this is not geographical space, but the space within which your theory really operates, right? Are we talking about a large number of people, right, for which this theory works? Are we talking about a large number of commodities, a large number of services, factors of production, right? Whichever way you talk about that, your domain has to be big enough to accommodate a really workable theory, right? If it's a very small domain, then your theory works within that domain, but outside it might not work. Okay, I'll explain to you in 5 or 10 minutes what exactly I'm saying by this. For example, in some of these building blocks of a theory, there might be inconsistency in how you assume the theory to function. For example, everybody knows that in any standard empirical and theoretical approaches, we have to assume that people behave rationally, right? If you go back to Professor Amartya Sen, right, or Kaushik Basu, or anybody you can think of, they would say that people have to be rational within certain bounded zones within which your purposes really work, right? If you behave irrationally, then we cannot track you. Okay? And there's a book by Steve Levitt and Stephen Dubner. Steve Levitt is a professor in University of Chicago. Once again, if I'm not clear or not specific, do stop me. There's no problem raising your hand or telling me that I need to re-explain something. Okay, please do that if you need to. So Steve Levitt and Stephen Dubner wrote a book, and you can pick it up if you like. It doesn't have to be. You don't have to be an economist to do that. But it's a common reading. It's like an armchair reading. It's called Freakonomics. Again, many of you might have heard about it. If you haven't, pick it up from a bookstore. And it talks about a large number of very funny and interesting cases where you would see that people, this rationality of individual action is questionable in some cases. Why we act in certain ways and not in another way is a question that is embedded in people's rational thinking. Because, for example, an economist would tell you that whatever you do, there must be some rationality behind it, right? You talk to somebody, you perform a task, you teach in a class, right? You join a service, you join military services or civilian services, or you travel somewhere. Everything has to have some rational thinking behind it, which ultimately leads to rise in utility of an individual. If you do something which leads to a loss of welfare or loss of utility for the person concerned, then you must be doing an irrational act. Now, nobody in their right mind does an irrational act. And yet some people, particularly those, and Steve Levitt and Stephen Dubner, as you can probably see on the screen, they talk about a lot of criminal cases where people do not seem to behave very rationally, right? And even in India or in any other places, you would see that despite the problem of criminals being apprehended, being given capital punishment, certain kinds of crime just don't go away, right? Is it irrational on the part of the individual to think that they can get away by doing something heinous kind of a crime? That would be completely, inadmissible in a research setting. You cannot work with this kind of people who think irrationally. That I can simply run away by stealing somebody's money or killing somebody in broad daylight. If somebody is thinking like that, they cannot be a subject in your research because it sounds irrational on the part of that individual, right? Now, how do you get rid of that? I mean, there's no way of getting rid of that, but data would include some of these people who might be actually irrational in their behavior. And there are many other ways, when you talk about climate change, because I'm pretty sure all of you are concerned about climate change issues. And when you see that people still use plastics, people still throw garbage on the street, right? Or dump effluents on the river or on the sea, right? Are we not hurting ourselves, our own interest? But we still can't stop doing it, right? Are we not thinking irrationally then? Are we subject of research? Well, you can always doubt it. That if we still do not understand the importance of being environmental friendly or being sensitive about environmental conditions that the world is facing, then we must be behaving irrationally, right? And we continue, right? We live our lives all right. We eat, laugh, and pray and do whatever we do, but we really don't behave the way the climate change scientists would request you time and again. We simply undermine those alerts. All right. So this goes on. This goes inside and outside your theoretical and empirical questions, and one has to be simply aware of those cross-cutting problems of trying to understand what research should be able to pin down these problems, and whether there's some incentive issue, whether there's a certain disincentives that really bug people, and that's why they do not behave the way they're supposed to behave, right? So it depends on the explanatory power of how well you have conceived of the reality, and given a good theory, you can probably explain that particular phenomenon. Now, a good theory doesn't mean that it cannot be falsified, right? You might have already known about the British philosopher Karl Popper, who said that every good theory is falsifiable, including a scientific theory like gravity, right? Many people say that gravity is infallible. Gravity cannot be questioned, cannot be challenged. Anything that goes up must come down, right? That's gravity. Well, scientists would themselves claim that gravity is not universal. There would be many instances possible when gravity is violated, right? Which makes it a theory still, which does not make it an axiom. Because if you're talking about an axiom, and people make this mistake when doing research, and please don't take this as sermons from an elder research, but this is something we see again and again in contemporary research, and we ourselves become prey to writing an axiom instead of a theory, as if we are trying to be the god of being able to tell everything in the truest possible sense. It's never like that. You have to keep questioning even a good theory and see what are the possible alternatives to find that there might be certain cracks, the certain falsifiability arguments that the theory holds true, right? There are many ways of doing it. I'll quickly, in 5 minutes, explain those to you. I hope some of these things will stay with you. it's not possible to understand a lot of things in a very short time. But if some of these issues really latch on to you, then we make ourselves better research in the process. There are certain tautological statements, and I'll give you a concrete example in this regard. For example, here it says that a day with high temperature is a hot day. That's a tautological statement. That's not a theory. That's not an axiom, because a hot day is typically qualified by high temperatures during the daytime, right? So many of us are economists, go back to commerce as a subject. We know that the GDP has several components, right? We write GDP as C plus I, consumption plus investment plus government expenditure plus external trade, X minus M, export minus import. I see even today many people really regress, like run regressions of these components on GDP. Now you cannot do that, because when you write GDP equals C plus I plus G plus X minus M, that's what you call an identity. The left side and the right side are identical. It's not like one side is influencing the other. So you cannot regress components of GDP on the GDP itself. Many people in economics, even social science, think of running identities as regression coefficients. Now that's bizarre and that's completely wrong, because you have to understand what is an identity, what are tautological, what you are saying by repeating the word. For example, if you say that whatever God does for good, that's an axiom, right? That's a tautological statement. If you know what God does for good, then can you ever challenge this proposition? Can you ever falsify this proposition? I guess not, because that's like a belief, that's like a statement that you began with, right? So once you have a tautological statement in place, then your theory is gone. Then you're not asking a theoretical question that needs empirical validation, and that empirical validation is absolutely important. Why? Because a good theory needs to be, once again, like I said, falsified. And in order to falsify a theory, you need a large number of empirical cases to be dealt with. If you know that a theory, on the other hand, is easily falsified, right, then you probably are not talking about a good theory. Then you probably made very flimsy assumptions or very strong assumptions. And we call this a strong assumption instead of a weak assumption. A weak assumption is good, unlike a weak anything else, right? A weak assumption is good because you can relax it and the theory doesn't fall out, right? A strong assumption is a problem because if you relax a strong assumption, the theory might fall apart. Okay, so try to make as weak and loose assumptions as possible. You still need some assumptions, because particularly in terms of making a general prediction, a nationwide policy, you cannot make a policy for 130 crore people in the country. You have to make a policy that applies to a large number of individuals, households, states, units of production, farms, whatever is your unit of analysis, right? You cannot make customizable one theory for every unit, all right? Which means that you are averaging out a lot of information. And which means that you need to understand the scope of how much empirical data can give you a confident theoretical perspective that remains valid for all of these individuals, right? And if this is still falsified, if you do it for 1%, 2%, 3%, and some of the social science research has actually an advantage in doing that. For example, a sociologist would never believe, particularly in India, would never believe in large-scale mass numbers. They would go and do an ethnographic study. I mean basically us, right? We are also part of the larger fraternity here, right? A sociologist among us would go and do an ethnographic study, live with a tribal house, try to see how they behave, how they eat, how they make the consumption habits, change under certain duress or under certain circumstances, when there's a when there's something which is like a festivity or during hard times, how do they change? And it would require a persistent observation on the part of the ethnographer over a large period of time. Any number would not be able to give that information, right? It's a different way of looking at or crunching information and understanding the quality of or the extent of or the expansion of research in social science, right? It's a valid way of doing it. It's an acceptable way of doing it. But again, the problem with that kind of research is that it would not allow you to make a general statement for a large number of households. Because what is true for a few households in a given village or a given location might not be true for many other states in the country, right? So ultimately, you would probably require more numbers, a bigger extent to understand how it really goes all the way to create a proposition which is empirically and theoretically valid, right? And then you also require a parsimony. A parsimony basically means that you don't need to see, you don't need to write too many variables. You don't need to talk too much about certain procedures. You have to have something which is given the space enough to explain your proposition, right? So trying to deal with something in repetitive ways should be avoided in the best possible manner. Okay. Now, how do you really put this all in a journal's perspective? You can have a methodological variation. You can have pure theory for your research. You can add it up with empirical analysis. You can have a combination of pure theory and empirical analysis for a journal's choice. You can do experimental work, completely experimental work, or in the absence of experimental possibilities or availability of data, which remains a problem in a country like India, that data, the way you want it, is often not available, right? Because microdata is a serious problem in India. You do get certain macro data, long time series from Reserve Bank of India, long series from Planning Commission. Sometimes Planning Commission has been turned into Ayog, Niti Ayog, but it's not giving sufficient amount of data. National Sample Survey does a lot of good secondary data. They also have unit level data, but it requires a lot of technical ability to crunch that data. So I'm not expecting that everybody would be able to do it, but in terms of access to data, India has a very good basis to collect data, but availability is sometimes really questionable and difficult, particularly in terms of at harder times, data is never easily available, right? So these are issues that one has to keep in mind when trying to produce theoretical and empirical research. So I sometimes propose that try to mix theory and empirics a little bit, because that would allow you to basically bypass the lack of data for India. If you have certain analytical propositions in mind, that might be preferred by the journal in some cases. So if you have both, then journals might not reject your paper so easily. Okay. To go about it, I don't have too much time. I'll just give you one example and then kind of stop. In recent times, we wrote a paper on something called trade adjustment assistance. Like I said, and as the introduction was, it's about my background is in economics, so we are trying to understand that, you see, opening up to international trade, which is again very commonsensical, you don't have to know economics for that, can be a problematic choice. Because if you open up to international trade, many of the foreign companies which are cheaper producers of your commodities might actually enter the country and make local productions go away. Just like saying that some of these Chinese products that actually poach into the Indian soil, and the Indian producers are not able to survive that competition, is a problem, right? Why is it happening? Well, it's happening because Chinese producers are probably producing at a cheaper price compared to what Indian producers are producing. And therefore, the market for Chinese products are there, market for higher priced Indian products are going away. Okay, that's one way of looking at it. And then the question arises that would you open your national borders to international trade? Well, there are a lot of gains from opening up to international trade, but the cost of international trade is also very high in some cases. So how do you really compensate those who lose out because of the infiltration of internationally traded commodities and services? Right? In United States and Canada, a procedure is commonly used. It's called trade adjustment assistance. It basically says that people can help international trade by some kind of a subsidy being given to them through government intervention, which would allow them to survive the onslaught of trade. So, for example, suppose I lose job because of Chinese products coming into my market, Chinese electrical goods. I used to make electrical goods. Now Chinese electrical goods basically sweep the Indian market and I lose my business. How would I survive, right? Then there's a certain questions that government might actually put in some support on the part of the political regime and give you a support to survive during this period when you are not doing well in terms of international trade. This result cannot go on forever, or this subsidy cannot go on forever, but might be true for about a year and a half, during which you might try to change the pattern of your business and get other support, right? And still remain valid in the business sense. Okay, so this is a procedure which is followed in the United States. If you want to replicate that for India, what are the procedures you need to do? So we had a theoretical proposition. I do not have time to talk about that at all here, but what I'm trying to tell you here is that when we try to apply empirical procedures to check if this is a possibility to subsidize people who lost due to international trade in India, we could not find data. Because government doesn't keep any data which is about subsidy being given to workers hurt by international trade. So what do we do? So we had to go to something called calibration, or using numbers, numerical analysis to support your theory. So I'll just show you one graph and then stop, because this is what I have been trying to tell you, that if you cannot just have one theory, then it must be supported by additional supporting evidence, whether it's numerical or empirical and stuff like that, which would help you.
दररोज काय व्हायचं माहिती का, 3 दिवस कधी 17 कधी 28.
Please unmute. Please mute yourself, whoever is speaking. Well, so if you see the graph on the screen, it is about a benchmark case, which is a red line in the middle, and then there are two alternative cases, beta 2 and beta 3, where we try to see that how much subsidy do you really can the government really give people who lost due to infiltration of international trade in the local markets, right? By taxing some of the other sources. So it's a combination of tax and subsidy that the government can actually pull out from within its system, and you see various combinations of those which show that there's a rise in the subsidy rate, okay, given the tax collection in the horizontal axis. The subsidy rate goes up, and then starts falling beyond a point. And that's an important issue, because this is what the theory also predicts, that subsidy cannot run forever. You're seeing for various other policies the government of India is actually pushing onto the country, that some of the subsidies are being lifted. You see the taxation, the taxation on the oil prices are too high at this point, and the subsidies are not really kicking in, whether it's purchase of cylinders for a gas oven and stuff like that. Subsidies are getting squeezed out because you cannot run a government on subsidy for too long. So the rate of subsidy went up and then started falling. So this tapering off of the support scheme that the government runs actually supported the theoretical proposition that goes with the tax subsidy schemes of the nature I just proposed. So let me stop here, because there's a lot I can go on about. I can show you some of the other graphs, like the empirical findings, which you can really see. We use data, and I'm pretty sure that you have been going through some of the empirical procedures of putting either eViews or some of the other programs that are commonly used. What I show here is a graph from Stata. That's a very commonly used software in economics and some of the other social sciences. And you see that the clustering of data and how you can really draw graphs through those are representative of your question in the first place. So if you have a question in mind, first plot it. That's the way I do it myself. I plot it, I see whether it's going up, it's going down, it's going up and then going down like a concave, or it's going down first and then going up like an U-shaped curve. And that gives you a better understanding of what your theory and empirical structure should be all about. You cannot just blindly apply an empirical procedure on data without seeing what the data looks like, right? So take it from me, when I look up some empirical exercise, there's a long wait before you run the regression analysis. It's about understanding the data. It's about cleaning up the data. There could be something called outliers in the data, some information which is not fitting with the other information at all, because of either somebody put it wrong or because of enumeration, even computational mistakes. Some number is there which is biasing your result all through. So look up the data first. Plot the points in any of the softwares you are comfortable with, and then run your regression analysis or whatever you're trying to do with the data. These are important preparatory steps for doing good theoretical and empirical research, right? So you question yourself, you look up the data time and again and see how it's really going to match with the proposition you have. You would not always find support in favor of the questions you are asking, but it's quite possible that some of the questions are violated. Sometimes it's good because, interesting research sometimes violates given common perceptions. If you can violate a common perception by availability of data or theoretical proposition, your papers have a greater chance of getting accepted in better journals, right? Let me stop here. I am quite visible in Google. If you have particular questions, if you need any support in terms of research or any other advice, assistance, write to me by email. My Center for Studies in Social Science email. You can just Google my name. You would find a lot of information about me. You can write to me, and I try to get back to you as quickly as possible. I reply to all emails I always get, right? So do not hesitate to write to me if I can be of any assistance in terms of your research support, all right? So thank you. I stop presenting for now, and if you have questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Participants, if you have any question, please forward it. Well, sir, I have one simple question.
Yeah, please.
That is regarding, you have spoken about the rationality. Rational.
Yeah.
So is there any particular difference or whether any boundary between the rational and ethical?
Yeah, there would be, because a rational person would might sometimes also do unethical work, right? Because if it really just like the criminal, right? If you know that if you can run away by doing something unethical, and that increases your income, your utility, the way you think about it, right? It may not be a common man's perception. You and I might not think alike, right? But if somebody thinks that I can rationally behave in certain way, and then it might be an unethical job, then there's a clear difference between ethical work and rationality, right? But most people would find that rational beliefs combined with ethical choices. So you are right in certain ways that your ethics of doing good things for the society, for individuals, for the country at large, is generally not unethical, right? And that's also rational because you're trying to make everybody's life better by trying to do it.
Thank you, sir. So participants, if you have question, please do it quickly. Well, sir, there are no questions. However,
All right.
you have so much enlightened us in this area. Really, we are grateful for such a good area you have chosen, and you have really enlightened us. We feel really great. Sir, we'll keep in contact with you for our future research purpose.
Sure.
And thank you for coming over here, sir.
Thank you. No problem. Thank you for having me. And like I said, if there's any question or any support you want me to highlight on, do write to me. I'll get back to you. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Bye.
So, dear participants, we have Professor Ashish Srivastava, a well-known academician, with us in this session now. So he is the Dean of School of Education from Mahatma Gandhi Central University of Bihar. He is the alumnus of University of Lucknow and Uttar Pradesh and Devi Aliya Vishwavidyalaya, Indore, Madhya Pradesh. A very popular figure among his students in the beginning of his career as a teacher. Professor Srivastava has served at the University of Lucknow, MIT University, Uttar Pradesh, before getting appointments simultaneously in prestigious universities of India, that is Banaras Hindu University and Vishwa Bharati. So he have got appointment in two of the universities, famous universities, but he had chosen the Vishwa Bharati University, Santiniketan, and he has been a professor in that place. So Professor Srivastava chose to serve the ashram of Nobel laureate Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore, and he did very well there in different capacities for almost a decade before joining Mahatma Gandhi Central University of Bihar as a professor of education. So interestingly, Professor Srivastava have degrees in education, he have degrees in mathematics, and most probably in economics. So we are very grateful that he have accepted our proposal and he is on this platform, and he will be delivering next 1 hour session. He have a plenty of presentation and publications to his credit, and his area of interest is educational policies and programs. Thank you, Professor Srivastava, for coming over here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So good afternoon to everyone. Before I begin, just let me know whether I'm audible and visible enough.
Yes, sir. You are audible also and visible also, sir.
Thank you so much. So at the outset, let me extend my heartfelt thanks and let me congratulate this wonderful department, Department of Commerce, Ram Thakur College, Agartala, Tripura, which is organizing this much needed program, research methodology in social sciences, sponsored by ICSSR NERC. And therefore, let me extend my heartfelt thanks and congratulations to Dr. Biplav Lagardu, Dr. Arjun Gop, and Dr. Subhadeep Paul, who are taking all pains to organize this wonderful event. My dear friends, dear scholars, those who are attending this program virtually today. Friends, Dr. Biplav has assigned me to speak with you on ethics and rigor in publication of research. Ethics and rigor in publication of research, which I personally feel is a very crucial issue. And my dear friends, my dear scholars, my dear researchers, I am not going to share anything with you which is bookish and which you can read in plenty of documents available at different e-version platforms. I will be sharing with you my own insights, which I have gained during last 2 decades as a PhD supervisor, as a PhD scholar, as a researcher, evaluating projects of UGC, ICSSR, and on the basis of the major part of my reflections will be from evaluating the PhD theses and reviewing the papers for different journals. So whatever I have gained, I will be sharing with you. Before I begin, my dear scholars, my dear friends, before I begin, let me share with you few of my very favorite lines from Mudaliar Commission's report, where Mudaliar Sahab in 1952-53 wrote that students must develop a scientific attitude of mind. Students must develop a scientific attitude of mind to think objectively and base their conclusions on tested data. And then he further says they should neither reject the old because it is old, nor accept the new because it is new, but dispassionately examine both and courageously reject whatever arrests the forces of justice and progress. While I share these lines, I often say that इन लाइनों को याद कर लो, इन लाइनों को अपनी आदत बना लो, क्योंकि जीवन में तर्क और वितर्क बहुत जरूरी है. तर्क और वितर्क बहुत जरूरी है, लेकिन हमको ध्यान रखना है कि तर्क और वितर्क के साथ कुतर्क ना होने पाए, कुतर्क ना होने पाए. So my dear colleagues, my dear friends, let me start with a joke which is very popular in some of the Western countries. And the joke goes like this. A student who is in graduation, what he thinks of his research. A student who is in graduation only, so a graduate student says, I am going to do research whatever I want. I am going to do research whatever I want. Then he enters into the PhD program, and then this same statement converts into another statement. Then he says, I am going to research whatever my professor wants. I am going to research whatever my professor wants. And then PhD got over, and then he enters into the university system as an assistant professor. And then the same statement again converts. And now it says, I am going to research whatever my promotion committee wants. I am going to research whatever my promotion committee wants. And then he, after this successful completion of this, facing this promotion committee, he becomes professor. Now, the same statement now converts to, I am going to research whatever my project grant committee wants. And then finally he gets retired, and then RIP, we all know RIP, RIP, rest in peace, jab hum kehte hain. So then the statement converts into, I am going to research whatever, and then RIP is research in peace. May I request few of you, those who are having good internet connection, can switch on their videos so that I can feel that I'm not speaking to my machine. I'm speaking to some of my learned colleagues. Those who are having good internet connection, otherwise it's okay, no problem. So my dear friends, we all know, because this program is precisely dealing in social sciences. So far as social sciences are concerned, you can see many inconsistencies, many dichotomies, so far as different concepts are concerned. For example, it is in hypothesis, or in research question, or in sampling, or in testing, applying testing. So as a researcher of social science, we need to make our own understanding, because you will be finding these inconsistencies among the different even different literature, so-called quality literature. Anyways, my mandate, Dr. Biplav has assigned me to speak with you on ethics and rigor in publication of research. So my dear friends, let me begin with writing research paper, and then I will be dealing with the ethical part, and then I will be concluding. So when I say writing research paper, the first question comes in our mind: what is a perfect research paper? What is a perfect research paper? So if you will be analyzing this question, what is a perfect research paper, you will be finding its answer from different perspectives. For example, for a scholar, for a PhD student, the perfect research paper is one that earns certain credits, certain grades, that wins an academic competition, that earns them a scholarly award. But for others who are involved in writing research paper, the perfect paper may be one that earns them to to raise or promotion or recognition within that institution where they are working. So the best part in writing research paper is that anyone can learn to write a research paper. Just reflect on this line. This is an interesting line. The best part in writing research paper is that anyone can learn to write a research paper. And for writing research paper, you do not need to be a born writer. So unlike creative writing, where quality is largely a function of imagination. Creative writing, if you reflect on creative writing, so unlike creative writing, where quality is largely a function of imagination, the expository writing done for research paper is based on standard formats, standards, expectations, stylistic guidelines that anyone can follow. But the point is, and in the very beginning I said I will be sharing my own insights which I have gained during last 2 decades as a project evaluator, as from educating the PhD thesis and reviewing the paper for different journals. So when we are aware that writing research paper, we need to follow certain formats, certain expectations, certain stylistic guidelines. So these are available and we need to follow it. When we will be following it, we will be in a position to follow when we are aware on all such issues. So my dear scholars, writing an effective research paper can be a daunting task, no doubt in it. While a research paper does not rely heavily on the writer's inspiration, it does require persistence. It does require attention to detail and a willingness to read, willingness to revise and perfect what was written by you. So if you have that willingness, if you have that persistence, if you have that attention, then you will be in a position to write or publish your research, or publish your research paper, or publish your article, whatever it is. Remember one thing. It's a moral thing. Remember, falling again and again until you learned to ride a 2-wheel bike, missing the ball over and over until you learn to bat, or making the most horrendous noise on a piano until you properly struck a chord. Expository writing is a lot like that only. We learn by doing. We learn by writing. We need to follow certain standards, certain formats, certain norms, and we get better with each practice. So improvement depends upon the guidance we get along that way. And this particular deliberation which I am going to have with you is having some very basic ingredients in this regard, For example, my dear scholars, my dear friends, number 1 is problem. And when I'm saying problem, this is somehow, I'm not feeling comfortable while sharing this, but my dear friends, my dear scholars, I have noticed, I have observed that, let me share one example. I have received a thesis from a very reputed university of India. I'm not going to take that name of that university. And that thesis was based on ethnographic research. And in the very beginning, the researcher has deliberated upon independent variable and dependent variable. So this particular incidents made me aware that, because thesis reached to an external evaluator after crossing many stages. A researcher has worked on it, supervisor was there, RACs were there, DRCs are there, BOS are there. So after many channels, it reaches to the external expert, and still it was having this kind of conceptual blunders. So as I said, that this particular deliberation will be dealing, in this deliberation, I'll be dealing with some very basic ingredients. And in this regard, I am taking first one is problem. So when we are selecting problem, we need to be very aware. We need to make ourselves aware whether your problem is, whether you are aware on the consistencies issues, inconsistency issues, or gap issues. Many a time I have noticed during vivas, during interaction, during interviews, that many scholars are not at all aware so far as consistency in research is concerned, inconsistency in research is concerned, and gap in the research area is concerned. So whenever you are selecting any problem, you need to make yourself aware whether it is going to have this quantitative approach or qualitative approach, because we need to make ourselves aware that if it is going to be use qualitative approach, then it will be the holistic one. If it is going to use quantitative approach, then it must be dealt in some variable terms. So problem, and your problem, whether your problem is too broad or whether your problem is too narrow. And when I share these things, I generally remind all the scholars, all my friends, to go into the flashback when you were in your PG programs, where you were taught the very fundamental basics of research, introduction of research. And now if you can recall the very first few chapters of researches during your masters, you will be finding, you will be in a position to recall that you were taught characteristics of good research problem in the very beginning. So as a researcher, we need to understand, we need to reflect so far as those characteristics of good research problem is concerned. I am sharing only one characteristic from that understanding, that is whether whatever problem you have selected for your research, for your paper, for your project, whether that problem is researchable, See, any problem can be a problem, but all the problems cannot be a researchable one. So from that understanding which you have gained in your masters itself, you need to understand that particular characteristics of a good research problem. And this particular characteristic says that the problem selected by a researcher must be researchable. See, my dear friends, those who are experienced, those who have a certain understanding of research, they all know that research is often tedious. Research is painfully slow and rarely spectacular. And when they understand these things, they realize that search for truth and solution of important problem take a great deal of time and energy, and the intensive application of logical thinking. And therefore, my dear scholars, my dear friends, I often, when I deal with the research methodology in social sciences especially, I often give a caution to be very careful on assumptions mismatch. And when I'm saying assumptions mismatch, this I have experienced during evaluating the PhD thesis and evaluating projects submitted to different funding agencies. What are assumption mismatches? For example, my dear friends, my dear colleagues, because I have very less time in my hand, I cannot deal all such issues, but you will be finding that many researchers around you, many researchers do not understand the very basics of, even I can say, types and forms of variables. For example, independent variable, dependent variable, concomitant variable, confounding variable, intervening variable, extraneous variable. If it is independent variable, then treatment variable. So, or types and forms of variable, when they are not clear on the assumptions of these things, they are unable to relate it with the scales of measurement. Accordingly, the use of parametric and non-parametric statistics in case of quantitative research. And similarly, there are several assumptions mismatch so far as qualitative researches are concerned. So, first of all, every researcher who is in the very initial stage, they need to work on, they need to take note on different assumptions, whether it is assumptions of variables or scales of measurement or different kind of statistics, whether it is inferential statistics or descriptive statistics, if it is inferential parametric statistics, non-parametric statistics, or the basic assumptions of quantitative researches, basic assumptions of qualitative researches. So these are very fundamental issues on which we need to make ourselves aware. We need to have our own notes. We need to have our own reflections on this assumptions mismatch. Once I can cite Many assumptions mismatch even done by senior faculty members while submitting projects to different funding agencies like UGC and ICSSR. And this shows their conceptual, not clarity in their conceptual understanding. And therefore, my dear friends, this is the high time when you need to work on these assumptions mismatch. You need to make yourself aware on different assumptions on different issues. Now, so far as ethics and rigor in publication of research is concerned, first thing, there are few steps, few protocols we need to understand. That identify the expectations. Identify the expectations. These expectations may be your expectations, your supervisor's expectations, the journal's expectations, the publisher's expectations. So identify the expectations. If you feel that you are in a position to fulfill those expectations, you are in a position to meet those due dates, the length, etc., then only you go for accepting it. Then you need to interpret the assignment. You need to have your own interpretation of the assignment. Then you need to analyze the audience. Then you need to choose a topic. Then you need to write a working thesis. Then write a proposal. So my dear friends, while you are going to select some issues or title or topic, you need to pay attention on certain issues. For example, I am sharing one of my scholars example. That particular scholar was not comfortable in qualitative research, and he chose to work on a very particular theme so far as ethnography research is concerned. And after a certain period of time, he realized that this is not his cup of tea, and that is why he left and went for some other problem. So whenever you are going to consider, when you are going to choose a research topic for publication of a research paper or for your project or for anything, you need to ensure, you need to have a kind of checklist in your hand. For example, your hobbies and special interests. Your hobbies and special interest. If it is coming from your hobbies and your special interest, it will be of your where you in that case you will be in a position to connect yourself to that problem. Or you can get it from class discussions that caught your attention and aroused your interest. So you can have research topic from that place. Then things you have read that caught your attention and aroused your interest. Then true stories you have heard about on the radio or a television, which provoked a reaction from you and made you happy or made you sad or made you angry or made you disgusted, whatever it is. So you can reflect from those issues. Then things you have overheard that you would like to know more about it. Then your hopes for the future, or so to say your worries about the future, or things that you dream about, or issues you think someone should do something about it. So make a list of everything that comes to your mind. Then you can use this list to begin brainstorming. Behind each topic, write a sentence or why it interests you. Do not correct or edit what you have written. Just write whatever comes to you. When you have finished the list, pick the topic and that most interests you. Once that you actually want to write about and that you feel you would have a lot to say about. So by this you will be having your issue or topic or title or problem. Once you are having your problem in your hand, then you need to evaluate your problem. You need to evaluate your problem. While evaluating your problem, you need to be very careful. And you need to have a kind of checklist in your mind. For example, I am sharing few points here with you. For example, once your problem is there in your hand, you can see, is this problem can effectively be solved using process of research? So now you are going to evaluate by asking this question to yourself. What is that question? Is this problem can effectively be solved using the process of research? If yes, go ahead. If no, rethink. Or you can evaluate, can I get relevant data? Can I get relevant data to test hypothesis or to answer research question? For example, I have come across one researcher from Madhya Pradesh who selected the sample from Jarwa tribe of Andaman and Nicobar. I don't know how many of you are aware of that Jarwa tribes. If you look at, if you are aware on Jarwa tribes, then you can easily imagine how much it is difficult to get into that particular community, but the tribal society. So problem is there, problem is researchable, is okay, fine. So the next question to you is, can I get relevant data to test hypothesis or answer research question? Then you need to ask another question to yourself, is my problem significant? Is my problem significant? Then you need to ask another question from yourself is whether any principle is involved. Whether any principle is involved. So you need to reflect, you need to work on such issues. Then you need to ask another question to yourself, would the solution or outcome make any difference in knowledge domain? Whether your problem is going to bring any change, any difference, going to make any difference in the knowledge domain? Is my problem a new one? Or you can ask this question in another way, is my problem from research gap? Or you can ask in a different manner, is answer already available? Whatever problem you have selected, you need to ask this question, is the answer already available? So if it is available, then you need to check the consistency. If it is consistent, then again you need to reflect. Then you need to ask another question, is research on my problem is feasible? And when I'm saying, is research on my problem is feasible, I am referring here three issues, three major parameters: time, access, and money. Time, access, and money. Access, I have already shared that Jarwa tribes, access is very difficult. You need to have your greatest access to the Home Ministry of Government of India, and then only you will be in a position to somehow reach to the Jarwa tribes. So is research on my problem feasible so far as time, access, and money is concerned? And then you need to ask another question, am I competent for this problem? Because sometimes there are certain stages when we moved by certain motivations or certain influences, and after a certain period of time we realize that, oh, this is not my cup of tea. So you need to ask another question, am I competent for this problem? Are pertinent data accessible? Are valid and reliable data gathering devices or procedures available? Do I have necessary resources, whether it is financial resources or it is human resources? So once you are satisfied on all such questions, so then you need to consider, then you can consider your problem. So after you have picked up a topic, begin to focus it by writing down anything you can think about the topic you choose, things to consider as you narrow your topic. So then you need to work on your opinion about it, interesting things that you have heard about it, things you have read about it, others' observations on it, or I can say any fact, assumptions, rumors, myths, and even the misimpressions and false representations you have heard about it. And my dear friends, my dear scholars, again I am sharing my own pathetic experience when I evaluate the PhD thesis, review the papers, and review the projects submitted to funding agencies, even by senior colleagues, because we take this particular area very casually, And therefore, again, I'm repeating, again, I'm telling you the caution. Therefore, we miss on certain assumptions mismatch, whether it is quantitative paradigm of research or it is qualitative paradigm of research. So you need to work on these very basic things, and I'm damn sure whenever you will be working on these fundamental questions, these very basic questions, automatically it will give you enough insight, and it will create a kind of context where you can be in a position to have a good research problem with a wonderful output. Then you need to work on methodology for example research approaches, for example analysis techniques, for example population, sample, tool, and all such issues. You have a very clear and categorical understanding. For example, my dear friends, day before yesterday I was delivering one lecture on research methodology, and I asked a question there, and that lecture was there for some of the faculty members. So there I asked a question: if opportunity given, which approach would you like to have for your researches, a qualitative or quantitative? Or if opportunity given, whether you would like to take experimental research or ethnographic research? So to my surprise, many of them responded that I will be taking quantitative research, I will be taking qualitative research. So then I asked whether that approach is important or the problem is important. Whether this approach is important or the problem is important. If approach is important, I cannot help it. But if problem is important, you need to work, you need to think, you need to reflect that what is important, problem or approach. So what I personally feel is you need to understand that problem is important. And once you understand your problem, and you will be understanding your problem if you will be having all such checklist in your hand. So if you feel that research problem is important, then you need to reflect whether quantitative approaches can solve this problem appropriately, or qualitative approaches are going to solve this problem appropriately, or some portion of my problem can be addressed by quantitative approach and some portion of my problem can be addressed by qualitative approach. So go for mixed method research. So understanding your problem, and that is why I am emphasizing here, understanding your problem in all its context, with all its perspective, is very important. I often share one joke in my classrooms. I often share this particular joke, and the joke is of two deafs. There are two deafs. So first deaf asked another, the second one, "Friend, are you going to the market?" So the second one replied, no, I am going to the market. So the first one said, "Oh, I thought you are going to the market." And whenever I share this joke, I share this joke for a reason, that whenever we deal with the teaching, or we deal with the research, or we deal with the policy making implementation, somewhere we behave like these two devs. So when I'm sharing this joke, let me substantiate it here at this platform. My dear friends, I am going to tell you one statement. You have to write that statement in your chat box. In your chat box, you have to write this statement. And before I am going to tell you that statement, before telling that statement, I am giving you one caution. And the caution is, whatever I will be sharing, I will be sharing 100% correct. Number one, caution number one. Caution number two is, whatever I am going to tell you, you have to write that statement only. Okay, so now I am giving you that statement. I am telling that statement. 10 horses have 24 legs. Write this statement in the chat box. 10 horses have 24 legs. Write this statement into your chat box. 10 horses have 24 legs. Ten horses. 10 horses, TEN 10. 10 horses have 24 legs. Tajul Islam is asking question from me, can horses have 24 legs? I am not going to answer you, my dear. Whatever I have said, with a caution. So you have to write that statement. 10 horses have 24 legs. Ram Thakur College is writing yes, but more also. No, understand the spirit. I am telling you that statement, you have to write that statement. 10 horses have 24 legs. Okay, fine. So I have received enough responses, which is more than sufficient for me to make my point clear for you. To make my point very clear for you. I shared that joke with you of two depths. Two depths. My dear friends, my dear researchers, see, you all are researchers. You are attending this program of research methodology in social sciences. That means it is very obvious that you are a researcher. Being a researcher, so you are a researcher, and you are a researcher. Before telling that statement, I gave one caution to you. What was that caution? Caution was, whatever I'll be saying, I will be speaking 100% correct. Can 10 horses have 24 legs? And I told you to write the statement which I am going to tell you. So 10 horses, TEN 10 horses cannot have 24 legs. So now I have written, now I am sending my statement, what I have told to you, I am sending into the chat box. You can see. 10 horses have 24 legs. 10 horses have 24 legs, F-O-R-E, 4 legs. So you all are researcher. In spite of all cautions, when I gave this statement, I gave it from my perspective. You received it from your perspective. And you wrote the statement from your perspective only. And this is what we need to take care in researches, especially in qualitative researches, because my dear friends, my dear scholars, until and unless we will be in a position to overcome from this perspective gap, we will not be in a position to write or produce or publish a good research. So that is why I'm saying all methodological approaches, analysis techniques, population sample tool, whatever you have been taught during your PGs itself, you need to make yourself aware assumption wise, because with my small experience across India, I have noticed that many researchers misses so far as assumptions of different issues are concerned. Assumptions of population, assumptions of sample, assumptions of tools, assumptions of approaches, assumptions of analysis techniques. So now at this stage, as a scholar, you need to work on, you need to reflect on, you need to make your notes on different assumptions so that you cannot commit all such mistakes. Now coming to the ethics part in research. Before sharing ethics in research, my dear friends, let me share one very famous statement of or conversation of Professor Kothari. I'm sure you must be knowing Professor Kothari. Professor Kothari submitted his report in 1966. So we all know that Professor Kothari very well. So we all know that Professor Kothari submitted his report in 1966 itself. And after 2 decades of his report, once Professor Kothari visited Delhi to deliver one lecture. So where Professor Kothari was asked, if you are given chance to revisit your report once again, what changes would you like to suggest now, after 2 decades now? So his reply was really interesting. He said, I would bring only one change. And that change would be in the name of the report itself. And now there is a message for you, my dear friends. Now, Professor Kothari said, now, instead of your education and national development, I would keep education and character development. Why? Because now I have understood that the character is the real trouble, real problem of India. And if we could shape the character, if we can make the character, if we can groom the character, national development is bound to happen. And my dear friends, standing in 2021, UGC has mandated 2 credits on research ethics. And that makes Kothari's vision truly correct. That in spite of passing 7.5 decades, we could not inculcate such kind of sense where we are needing to mandate to certain course on research ethics. I don't know how many of you are aware of a newspaper report after Times Asian ranking published in 1617. There was a newspaper report. Front page news was reported under the caption. The heading of the news was "Tiger in Graduate, Rat in Research." Tiger in Graduate, Rat in Research. I don't know about other disciplines of social sciences, but I can say from education background, because I'm coming from education background, I can say from education background that in India, the first PhD in education was enrolled in 1941, which was awarded in 1943 by University of Mumbai. Then second thesis was done awarded by University of Lucknow in 1949. Since then till date, the crisis of quality, crisis of rigor, crisis of ethics is at stake. And as I am repeatedly saying, lack of conceptual clarity is very basic fundamental problem to all such concerns. Lack of conceptual clarity. And therefore, again, I congratulate Dr. Biplav and the entire team for taking all efforts to organize such kind of program where you are being exposed on certain issues. Because this conceptual clarity is not my mandate. We'll discuss sometime later, and whenever we'll be getting time. My dear scholars, my dear friends, increasing number of scholars and their need for quality research have also resulted in several compromises in the manner in which admissions to the institutions are made, in which the allotment of scholars are being done. I'm truly feeling bad while sharing that I have seen some institutions where scholars are being distributed on the basis of lottery. So in the manner where how students are taking admission to the institution, how they are being allotted. So at each stage, unethical practices are abound. In research arena, precisely, there are issues of plagiarism, there are issues of predatory journals, there are issues of manufactured data. I'm having plenty of personal experiences where I have came across the manufactured data for writing a thesis or writing a paper or for a project. So issues of plagiarism, issues of predatory journals, issues of manufacturing data, issues of ghost or guest authorship, to issues of use of money as a surrogate for quality. I don't know, but for last 6 months, I am receiving plenty of phones, somewhere from Uttarakhand, somewhere from Karnataka, that they are having a established website, and they are having established staff to write thesis, to write papers on your behalf, etc. So ghost or guest authorship for to issues of use of money as surrogate for quality. So these all things have led to erosion of values and ethical standards. Whether it is plagiarism, predatory journals, manufacturing data, ghost or guest authorship, it's all issues have led to erosion of values and ethical standards. And again and again, since my beginning, since my deliberation, I am repeating again and again that lack of conceptual clarity, lack of understanding on issues of basics, fundamentals of researches, lack of our attention so far as basic questions are concerned, leads to commit many mistakes so far as ethical issues are concerned. We all know that ethics, in the manner in which research information is shared with the stakeholders, needs much discussion. All the unethical practices are rooted in the simple desire for most of the. I'm summarizing in 5 to 7 minutes, then I'll be sharing, taking up your questions. So all the unethical practices are rooted in the simple desire for shortcuts to success and to innate aspiration of the less meritorious. Can you mute yourself, please? It is creating disturbance. Shripat Gaikwad. Shripat
Yes, sir.
Gaikwad.
Yeah.
Please mute yourself. Thank you. Thank you. So all unethical practices are rooted in the simple desire for, as I was telling, to the shortcuts to success, and the innate aspirations of the less meritorious to rise higher in one's profession. So all such bookish issues we are aware. Now, my dear friends, as a concept, if you look at research ethics, from this kind of bent of mind, as a concept, research ethics refers to a complex set of values, standards, and institutional schemes that help to constitute and regulate scientific activity. Ultimately, research ethics is a kind of codification, I can say, codification of ethics of sciences in practice. Social sciences, precisely, social science investigates complex issues which involve cultural, legal, economic, and political phenomena. And this complexity means that social science researches must concern itself with moral integrity to ensure that research process and findings are trustworthy and valid. So norms and values of researches, freedom of researches, responsibility of researches, responsibility of institution. We need to understand all such issues. Other than these issues, we need to work, we need to understand, we need to have our own idea so far as researches are concerned, so far as ethics of research is concerned, where we are going to deal with human dignity, we are going to deal with the privacy, we are having our duty to inform the researchers. We need to have consent and obligation to notify, confidentiality, limited reuse, then storage of personal data, responsibility for avoiding harm, respect for third parties, protection of children or protection of any segment which is crucial, respect for the values and motives of others, respect for privacy and family life, respect for posthumous reputations, then defining rules and responsibilities, then respect for private interests, respect for public administration, respect for vulnerable groups, then I can say preservation of cultural monuments and remains, because we are dealing with social sciences research, then research on other cultures. When we are working on other cultures, then we need to be very careful. Limits on cultural recognition. Then another very important issue so far as ethics is concerned, that relates with the co-authorships. When I'm saying co-authorships, my dear friends, researchers must observe good publication practice, respect the contributions of other researchers, and observe the recognized standards of authorship and cooperation. Then which is very important, good citation practice. Then plagiarism, we all know, because nowadays we are dealing this terminology on the everyday basis. Then scientific integrity, then data sharing, then impartiality, then relations with colleagues, then student supervisor relationships, then responsibilities of supervisors and project managers, and working with our supervisors and project managers. Then different aspects relates with the presentation and use of results, transparency in research funding, conflict of interests, right and duty to publish your work. Then ethics of researchers deals with while you are disseminating your research, so dissemination as an academic responsibility, requirement for individuals and institutions, interdisciplinary discourse and public deliberation, then participation in public debate, accountability in dissemination, then reporting results to participants. So all these issues I have shared with you. needs your attention, not only attention, your very clear and categorical understanding, your clear and categorical reflection on such issues. And one more thing you need to understand, and in order to make this point, I am sharing one small, let me share with you. Can you see my screen now? Anyone can tell? Can you see my screen now?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Okay. So as a researcher,
sir.
you need to be very careful when you are going to use different kind of open educational resources. So you need to understand all kind of licenses we are having. I have found, my dear friends, that many of us, including faculty members, are not aware on the nature of licensing, and somehow unintentionally they use contents and they land into the trouble like anything. So you need to understand. Please mute yourself. Those who have unmuted, please mute yourself. Thank you. So, so you need to understand all such licenses. For example, you can see the picture from least free to most free. Least free to most free. What is least free? These are not OER. CC, BY, NC, ND, CC, BY, ND. These are not OERs. These are least free. Then CC, BY, NC, SA, CC, BY, NC, CC, BY, SA, CC, BY, and public domain. So you can see the arrow is there. You can see the OERs are there. What are not the OERs is also there. So you need to, as a researcher, you need to understand all such licensing so that you can use, you can cite, you can give references appropriately. And we need to understand the license terms. For example, attribution, that is BY. BY is attribution. Attribution means you must give appropriate credit, provide a link to the license, and indicate if changes were made. You may do so in any reasonable manner, but not in any way that suggests the licensor endorses you or your use. And NC, what NC means? Non-commercial. The material cannot be used for commercial purposes. SA means share alike. That means if you remix, transform, or build upon the material, you must distribute your contributions under the same license as the original. Then ND means no derivative works. If you remix, transform, or build upon the material, you may not distribute the modified material. So you need to understand. So this C, full copyright, all right reserves. CC means Creative Commons, some right reserves. PD means public domain, no right reserves. So this I just wanted to share with you to make you understand, on different kind of licensing, so that it can save you from landing into any kind of trouble so far as ethical issues are concerned. Because right now, nowadays, we are very much conscious so far as research ethic is concerned. With these words, thank you so much, Dr. Biplav and Dr. Arjun and Dr. Subhadeep Paul, for giving me this opportunity to share my insights with you. Now the forum is open for discussion, for your questions, for your suggestions. Yes, Gaikwad.
May I have one question we asking you, sir?
Please.
What are minimum plagiarism level of research PhD thesis?
See,
Minimum.
there is no such a standard permission for using plagiarism, but often if I'm sharing this from my understanding, that often 8%, 10%, it is said that 8 to 10% plagiarism with reference, Shripad Gaikwad, can be tolerable. So there is no standard rule, but it varies from institution to institution.
Yes.
But it ranges from it. I have seen across. I have witnessed 10% to 25%. I have seen with reference.
Okay, sir. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. Any other? I was expecting bombarding of questions.
Participants, you can ask the questions you have. Any doubts?
No questions.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Rupa,
sir, hello,
please.
Sir.
Yes.
Sir, I have one question. Now I am
Please.
in a one WhatsApp group. There is a one person who is selling some software like plagiarism remover software. So is it proper to purchase, to take the subscription of that software and remove
Rupa
the
Gupta,
yes, sir.
I got the essence of your question. I got the essence of your question. And
Yes.
if you have noticed, I shared that sentiment of Professor Kothari. The real trouble of India is character, and I would be replacing one word from the name of my report: education and nation development. Rather, I would like to keep education and character development. So, my dear friends, it is our integrity. We need to use our common sense. We need to use our presence of mind. We need to use our integrity, sense of professionalism. Few weeks back, I received a call from Karnataka that, sir, if any researcher is not in a position to write his thesis, kindly refer that case to us. We will be writing the thesis, we will be writing the papers, we will be writing this, we will be writing that. And they are having their official websites. They are calling there. I am holding a position right now. I am a dean of a school of education, and they are straight away calling me also. You can see my Twitter account. I have posted that this thing. So we need to, in that case, we need to use our own presence of mind, our own common sense, our own integrity, so far as ethical issues are concerned, Dr. Rupaji. Rupaji.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Sir, I have a question.
Yes, please, Muaz Ali.
Sir, basically, literature review is very important part of any research. So when we are citing, even though, and increase the citation, then it will also increase the plagiarism. So how will check it within 8 to 10%, sir?
No, see, so far as reviewing is concerned, I have something to share with you, because many a times, if you look at our traditional writing pattern, you will be finding that we are quoting the reviews like XYZ in the year this, worked on this, objective were this, he found this. So this is not at all a pattern to write the reviews. What is actual when you are writing reviews? You need to begin with your idea, what you are going to share. You have to proceed with your idea, and in between you have to substantiate your idea with someone's finding. That is actually review. When you will be writing in such a manner, you will not be facing any issues of plagiarism. Muaz Ali sir.
Okay, sir. Thank you. What is the limitation of the citation research? It is especially in for PhD. Will it be in literature review section 100 is sufficient or more?
No, I didn't get your question clearly. What is your
Because
your question?
I'm asking, sir, how many citation will be there in literature review, so that we will cut it down. Also, I include my idea in that. Whatever you're saying, that's very true. I will include my idea, and along with I support some citation.
Okay. Now I somehow I could understand the essence of your question. See, there is no such recommendation or no such suggestion so far as restricting to any number of citation is concerned. Okay. So it relates to the wisdom of a researcher.
Okay, sir.
Up to the relevancy of your research problem, up to the need of your research problem.
Okay, sir. Got it, sir. Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Well, sir, we have few questions in the message. The first question is how to publish research papers in UGC care listed or Scopus journals, by Rahul Singh.
See, how to publish research papers in UGC care listed journal. I answered this question in my deliberation itself. First of all, identify the journal. Then you see that whether whatever you are conceiving, whether your idea, whether your theme is suitable to that journal. If it is so, go ahead. Then after identifying that journal, after matching your theme, then you read the instructions of that journal, their demands, their expectations, and whatever you have written, if you can fulfill their expectations, you can. So ultimately, the first answer is, I'll make a list of journals, identify your journals, and this is a time-taking process. It is a gradual process. It is not that you will be sitting and you will be identifying all the journals. And one more thing, whenever you are reading, when you are referring some journals, you can find several references of journals there. So while reading a paper, keep notes on, make a note on different available journals. Number one. Number two question is how to find out journals for publishing. Rahul Singh, again, Rahul Singh's question is how to find good journals for publishing. See, my dear scholar, Rahul Singh ji, first of all, start reading. First of all, start reading. When I was in Vishwa Bharati, I was in Shanti Niketan. One day, the chief librarian of Vishwa Bharati spoke to me, and he was very sad. He was sad because that day he had received some statistics from InflibNet, where it was shown that the can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so he was sad. My chief librarian said because he InflibNet shared some statistics where it was found that only 32 scholars accessed the facilities provided by the InflibNet. So, my dear friends, first of all, start reading good journals. Start using the facilities provided by your respective institutions. And then when you will be referring to journals on JSTOR, on SAGE, on many other platforms are there. So when you will be starting reading journals, you will be like a snowball sampling. You will be in a position to find a great list so far as available journals are concerned. I'm sorry because I got disconnected. I missed the third question. No, okay. Sir, does citation belong to plagiarism? Citation does not belong to plagiarism. Okay, any other question?
Sir, I think the question means that whether when you cite, whether it refers to plagiarism. I think that sort of question.
See, if you are within limits, if you are citing with proper referencing, it is not considered as plagiarism. It will be considered only plagiarism when you are not citing, when you are not referring. There is any platform to find out journals. UGC is the right platform, Rahul Singh. UGC has now a list of journals, different index journals. Okay, anything else?
Okay, sir, I don't think we have any further questions. So, sir, it was really an informative session from you. Sir, we have benefited a lot, and we are very pleased that you have come over in this platform to give your valuable these sessions. So, sir, we know that in future we'll do have more interactions with you. We can learn a lot from you, sir. Thank you, sir, for coming over here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, and keep in touch. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir, we will keep in touch, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Wish you all good luck.
Thank you, sir. So, dear participants, now we have come over to the second completion of the second session. We shall meet again at 2 p.m. with a very informative, another more informative lecture on books and academics from Central University librarian B.K. Singh, Dr. B.K. Singh. And he will be also telling us regarding more of plagiarism. So you need not worry. Those who have any doubts, keep the doubts together and you just put it out to our resource person. So do come in proper dress. We shall also try to take some video shots in the afternoon session. So okay, thank you all.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.